So, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in the Poetic Reflection for Higher Education session. Um, we're so happy to have you all with us, and we're so happy to have Sam Illingworth. I'm going to start with some of our community agreements, and I'm going to post a link to them in the chat later. Or if somebody of my co-hosts can help me with this one, I would appreciate it.
I can send
So
it.
you're welcome here, regardless of race, ethnicity, background, disability, gender, sexual orientation, anything. We would like for you to critique ideas, not people, and make space for others and assume positive intentions. There will always be a quiet room option if somebody has no mood for participating in breakout rooms, should there be any. You can always message me anytime throughout over the course of the session with any concerns you have. If you have needs regarding your accessibility, the way you're present here, anything regardless of how the session is going, regarding how the session is going, you can message me privately. Um, Closed captions are available. You can enable it yourself on your Zoom by clicking on the closed caption icon under the three dots, which is the more options. You can always enable it. If you have issues with this, you can always let me know. We are recording this session, so if somebody has objections to recording, you can rename yourself to anonymous or something to avoid appearing in the recording. If you have difficulty with this, you can also let me know. We have a Discord server for asynchronous engagement, and we would like for all of you to join us in that Discord server. I'm gonna also be posting a link to the chat, so it's easier for you. Here are the steps also on the screen, and I'm gonna post all of them in the chat. Here is the session feedback QR code also on the screen. I'm going to post all that in the chat later. And you can also have that open to give feedback on the session. We would like to hear what you think of the session and how we could improve it. Until now, I'm gonna stop here actually and hand over to Dr. Sam Illingworth to get us started. Thank
Great.
you.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, my name's Sam. I'm a professor of creative pedagogies at Edinburgh Napier University in the UK. And I am really delighted to be here. This is my second MYFest. And yeah, really happy to connect with people on Discord afterwards or via the links there to my Blue Sky profile, etc. So a lot of my work and practice situates on using poetry as a tool to help connect communities and also to help platform the voices of marginalized and underserved communities, and also to really think about how we can use poetry to reflect on staff and student belonging in higher education. So the purpose of this workshop really, I guess, is to equip you with some skills that you might use to reflect within higher education and beyond using poetry. So I'll aim to finish just before the hour, so we can have like questions and stuff. But the basics, and also it's very relaxed, it's very informal. So if we're doing anything that you don't like, just tell me. If you're doing anything you want to do more of, just tell me. If you're bored, just tell me, and we can just iterate as we go. So we're just going to have a raw approach to poetry, as I call it. We're going to read some poetry, we're going to analyze some poetry, and we're going to write some poetry. And I've got a secret learning outcome for the session that I'll tell you at the very end. But I guess the learning outcomes are really, hopefully by the end of the session, you can think about how you might use poetry to reflect in higher education, and also just in learning and teaching more broadly as well. And I just want to start by reading a poem. And in a way, we could think of this poem as being a hypothesis for the session. I'm just going to read it. I'm not going to offer any comment on it. So this is A Position at the University by Lydia Davis. I think I know what sort of person I am, but then I think, but this stranger will imagine me quite otherwise when he or she hears this or that to my credit. For instance, that I have a position at the university. The fact that I have a position at the university will appear to mean that I must be the sort of person who has a position at the university. But then I have to admit with surprise that after all, it is true that I have a position at the university. And if it is true, then perhaps I really am the sort of person you imagine when you hear that a person has a position at the university. But on the other hand, I know I am not the sort of person I imagine when I hear that a person has a position at the university. Then I see what the problem is. When others describe me this way, they appear to describe me completely, whereas in fact they do not describe me completely, and a complete description of me would include truths that seem quite incompatible with the fact that I have a position at the university. I don't offer any comment on that, others to say that when I first read it, I felt very seen, in quite a nice way though, as well. So the easy bits out of the way, I've read some poetry, right? And we're gonna analyze some poetry. And analyzing poetry sometimes fills people with fear or with dread, oftentimes because poetry can be made to feel exclusive or exclusionary, sometimes because very talented poets write things like this. So Percy Shelley, you know, probably one of the most famous English romantic poets, tells us that poetry lifts the veil from the hidden beauty of the world and makes familiar objects be as if they were not familiar. It sounds very intelligent. Adrienne Rich, you know, incredible 20th century poet and feminist, she tells us that poems are like dreams. In them you put what you don't know you know. Okay, again, I mean, it's Adrienne Rich. It must be right. It must be true. And then Carl Sandburg, 3 times Pulitzer Prize winner Carl Sandburg, tells us that poetry is the journal of a sea animal living on land, wanting to fly in the air. At which time I think that this is a bit silly, really. This is not what poetry is. This is a very exclusive and exclusionary way of looking at poetry, and can sometimes put people off wanting to engage with poetry, wanting to analyze poetry, and want to talk about poetry. So I'll offer you an alternative way of thinking about poetry from a far less celebrated, successful, and remunerated poet, myself. And that is that poetry is whatever it means to you and how it relates to your needs, your experiences, and your understanding. And what I mean by this is, and I guess if you take anything from the workshop today, is that nobody knows what a poem is written about apart from the poet. But the poet doesn't know you, and they don't know everything about your life that's led up to that very moment of you reading that poem, your dreams, your memories, your lived experiences, your knowledge. So what you take from a poem is no more or less correct than anybody else's. It's just different. And this is not to denigrate the work of English language or poetic critics. It's just that when these experts analyze a poem, they bring different knowledge and lived experience and expertise. So it's okay to love poems that other people hate. It's okay to hate poems that other people love. It's okay to be ambivalent towards poems. You might love a poem on a Monday, despise it on a Friday. I know that poems that I really loved in my youth, I feel awkward around now, and poems that I felt awkward around in my youth, I really maybe resonate with me now as well. So yeah, that's a lovely quote from Rita. Would we see that magic in all forms of poetry, other forms of poetry beyond text? Absolutely. And magic is in all the poetry that we do. So with that in mind, I'm going to invite you to look at some poems, and I just want you to pick one and think about whether you like it or not and why. And the poems I'm going to put in the chat as well. these are from a collection of poems that people wrote, some anonymously, some not, about their experiences of working in higher education. So what I'd invite people to do in the next 5 minutes is just to go to that website that I put on screen, and the QR code takes you there as well. And just to scroll through, maybe start at the top or start at the bottom, pick a couple of poems and just see if they resonate with you, and if so, why, and they might not as well. And again, as was made clear at the start by Yasser, this is an opportunity to critique ideas rather than people. This is a safe space, so it's okay for us to have different opinions on poems, but I guess just being respectful of the fact that these have been written by humans as well. So yeah, let's say about 4 minutes to do this. I'll do the exercise as well. And for people who are watching the recording, if you can just go to this website and look through some of the poems, feel free to either just keep the video running in the background or pause it as you're doing so and then fast forward later. So I'll give us a 1 minute warning, and then we can just all do this as well. And you can look at my face as I scroll through these poems. And then you can, yeah, I'm just going to pick one in the middle somewhere and read these again.
We got a question in the chat from Rita. She's asking about the magic. She says, I'm gonna try to read.
Yeah, I've read that out loud, so I can address that as people. I'll address that, Yasser, as people read through the poems. Thank you. So
Okay.
Rita said, would we see that magic in all forms of poetry? I hope that we do. The forms of poetry beyond text, and I'd say that they definitely are. I mean, we can see visual poems, we can see poetry in the way that nature moves, we can see poetry in the way that the seasons change. So poetry definitely doesn't need to be limited by the language or the languages that we speak. Reminded of Ludwig Wittgenstein, the Austrian philosopher's words, when he says, the limits of my language are the limits of my world. So yeah, poetry definitely can exist beyond text. Thank you for that question, Rita. And yeah, so maybe a couple more minutes just to scroll through that blog and to try to find a poem or a couple of poems that speak to you, or which you resonate against as well. I mean, that's just as important. Thank you, Laura, for the comment of my reading out loud. Poetry, when you read out loud, sounds very different to when it's written on the page, definitely. And I think that some poems are meant to be read out loud and some poems are meant to exist. Maybe we can start the... Thanks, Yasser. And yeah, please just raise your hand virtually or physically, or put into the chat if you've got some thoughts or poems that you'd like to discuss. Which of the poems did you, I guess, yeah, resonated with you or not? Or which ones did you enjoy and what did you take from them? Okay, so thank you. Laura liked Mid-Semester Slump very much. Laura, do you feel comfortable coming on to mic to expand on that slightly?
Oh, sure. I heard so much voice in this poem. Like I could really hear a person speaking to me, and I felt connected. So I would love to sit down with this person and just talk. It really jumped out at me compared to the others. There were a lot that I liked, but this one really jumped out for that quality of like an actual person's voice.
Thanks, Laura. And I think, again, it's where poetry can be really powerful as a research method, because it's such I say it's a way of mainlining into somebody's empathy. Of, really by reading those words, of getting such an amazing way into the lived experiences in which they are. As people think about their, I mean, again, feel free just to put your hand up as well. So helping students learn here, Jenny says that helping students learn hit home. I'm on a committee examining our first year experience. I think I'm going to share them. Oh, Jenny, that'd be lovely. Jenny, do you feel comfortable coming on to mic, just speaking more about that poem, or?
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to unmute. I don't know, we've spent so much time trying to figure out how to meet our students' needs, but it's more than just getting them a job when they get out, and we tend to forget that. And I think this just really, it's like we want them to grow as people, but we're told, no, we have to have them ready for the workforce. So how do we find that balance? And I think that it just addressed it really nice, and just being there. Like, our job is to help them get to the next stage, whatever that looks like for them.
No, thanks, Jenny. And Rita touched on this earlier as well in terms of starting a session with a poem. Starting a session or a workshop with a poem can be really powerful. And I'd invite people to share this repository with others as well, because I sometimes check in with the poems in this repository just to remind myself that I'm not alone and that other people experience many of the similar issues. A poem that I really enjoy there's one called the REF workshop. So for people who are not in the UK, the REF is the Research Excellence Framework, which is kind of a calibration exercise for research excellence across all UK universities. And it's a 3-line poem that just says, it's called the REF workshop. Outside a bird flew at the window pane. Inside we framed knowledge in. And for people who've been in those workshops where we spend a long time talking about what makes excellent or not excellent research, I think it's very, very good. Yeah, it's perfect, isn't it, Laura? And I think that, again, from my experience, inviting people to write poems, when they write a poem, it doesn't matter about the aesthetics. They put so much of themselves into it, like much more so than like an interview or a survey question, that it really gives you this amazing insight into the way that they're thinking and experiencing that as well. Yeah, Heather, that line, higher education is not for people like you, is incredibly powerful, and one that many people sadly can resonate with. Irene's also written about the foreigner's dilemma resonating with me. Being a foreigner does not always mean the big moves. It can also be in our own lives when we make decisions and they make us feel like foreigners in many ways. That's a lovely insight for that, Irene. Thank you. So yeah, I mean, I would just invite people as well to continue to percolate on these poems and to revisit them. And if people want to contribute poems to them as well, really, really welcome to do so. And Rita, thank you for sharing that research on poetic self-study research as well. Poetry as autoethnography can be incredibly powerful. We did a study on some of these poems as well that I might return to at the end of this workshop. But for now, I just offer these poems to everyone as a way of reconnecting with what poetry is rather than what poetry is not, and this idea that poetry is for everybody. And one of the questions I often get asked is, poetry can be seen by many people to be exclusive, so how do we get around that? And I'll come to you in a second, Alia. And one of the ways that we do that is that we talk to our audiences and find out what interests them, and then try to find poetry that resonates with them as well. Sorry, Alia, did you want to ask a question or give a comment?
No, I was just going to comment because I mean, all of them have a special, unique taste, to be honest, but maybe two that stood out to me were helping a student learn and an ode to teaching. And this actually reminded me of another quote or saying, or it's actually very inspiring. If you would allow me to read it out loud, I'd love to share it with you all.
Please, thank you.
So it says, I've come to a frightening conclusion that I am the decisive element in the classroom. It's my daily mood that makes the weather. As a teacher, I possess a tremendous power to make a child's life miserable or joyous. I can be a tool of torture or an instrument of inspiration. I can humiliate or humor, hurt or heal. In all situations, it is my response that decides whether a crisis will be escalated or de-escalated, and a child humanized or dehumanized.
Oh wow, thank you, Alia. They're really powerful words. Thank you so much for sharing those with the group. And if you've got a link to that as well, please feel free to share that in the chat. But thank you very much. Sure. Okay, so we've read some poems, we've analysed some poems. Let's write some poems. So we're gonna do some really a really basic writing exercise. It's just called a list poem. So basically, if you get your writing implements ready, you can use a piece of paper, you can use a notebook, you can use a laptop, a mobile phone, whatever you've got. And I'm just going to give you a prompt, and I want you to write for about 45, 50 seconds without stopping. And you can write a bullet point list, you can write long rambling sentences, Joycean streams of consciousness, whatever you want. But I'll talk over the top, but the idea is just to keep writing until I say stop. Okay, so we'll do 3 of these. We probably won't share the first 2, but I will invite people to share the 3rd one in the chat if they feel comfortable doing so. So what I'd like you to do is, starting from now, I would like to list all the things in your room. Go. And I'll talk over the top so there's no awkward silence. So look around your room, see what's there. What are things you can see? What are the things you can hear? What are the things you can touch, that you can smell, that you can taste even? Who are the people in your room? What are the memories in your room? What are the ideas in your room? What are the absences in your room? And again, you can write in a very bulleted list, like a shopping list, or you can just write in long, join together sentences, or a combination, or somewhere in between. Got about 5 seconds left. 3, 2, 1, and stop. Okay, so we're going to do the same exercise again for a slightly different prompt. So now what I would like you to do when I say go is to list all the things out of a window in your room. Go. And if you're in a room without a window, I'm sorry, imagine that there's a window in your room. I always like this exercise because you can see people looking around their rooms, which is nice. So yeah, again, things that are outside of the window, things that you can see, hear, smell, taste, touch. People outside the room, places outside the room. Things that were there today, gone yesterday, things that were there yesterday and have gone today. Again, just keep writing. We've got about 5 seconds left. 4, 3, 2, 1, and stop. Okay. So final exercise now. I want you to do, again, when I say go, responding to this prompt, I want you to list all the things you associate with higher education. Go. They can be negative things, they can be positive things, they can be people, they can be ideas, they can be colleagues, they can be students, they can be policies, they can be governance, they can be research, they can be memories, they can be, I guess, yeah, formative experiences of you, formative experiences that you've been involved with. If you've been very literal until now, I'd encourage you to be a little bit more metaphorical or playful. And likewise, if you've been very playful until now, maybe you could afford to be a little bit more literal. Just keep writing. You've got about 5 seconds left. 4, 3, 2, 1, and stop. Okay, so feel free to, if you want to share those poems in the chat. And we're going to use those poems for a word bank later on as well. I also find this a really useful exercise. Whenever I have a problem on something, I try and write a poem about it. The reason being that it enables you to creatively tap into the incubation period in your brain. So rather than just kind of waiting for a solution to come to your subconscious, it forces you to think about the problem in a different way. And the way that I start writing poems about a problem is that I start with this list poem. So I have the problem and then I give myself 60 seconds and write everything that's down with it. So, you know, talking about that example that Jenny gave earlier, if we're thinking about how do we prepare our students for the workplace without training them to be subsumed into the workplace, then, you know, we could start by listing all the things that we associate with that and then start to maybe form it into a poem. So yeah, if you feel comfortable doing so, feel free to share it into the chat. So Rita's written spaces we find that surround and close us in, people we share that find their ways in, policies that try to steal out thoughts and actions, and a culture that binds. That is wonderful for 45 seconds, Rita. Thank you very much. Yeah, very thought-provoking and deep as well. So what we're going to do now is we're going to reflect, and we're going to use poetry for reflection. So just to introduce or reintroduce some of you to this model of reflection. So this is by Gibbs, Alan Gibbs. And this is a model of reflection that I find very helpful So when my background is in physics and my PhD was in atmospheric physics, and when I transitioned into social science research and pedagogy, I found it very difficult to reflect. I found what I was doing was instead describing what had happened. And then someone shared this model with me of Gibbs, and I found it really helpful because how my brain works, it enabled me to compartmentalize the different sections of the reflection. So start by describing what happened, think about what the feeling at the time, what was good and bad about the experience, what sense can I make of the situation, the conclusion, what else could I have done, and the action plan. If it arose again, what would I do then? And so, there's difficulty sometimes using this model, and that the evaluation and the analysis, or the action plan and the conclusion, can sometimes merge. But as a starting point, it's really helpful. And again, just the way my brain works, it really helped for me to think that the description is 1/6 of the reflection and not actually all of the reflection itself. Just some more lovely list poems coming in that I'll share. So Laura's written love, loss, lost opportunity, teacher, students, classrooms full and empty. That's beautiful. And Rachel gives a comment that I found my third poem heavily influenced by my own experience as a student rather than my job within higher ed. That is really interesting, Rachel. And yes, sorry, Laura, not you. Maybe a namesake of yours. It's probably the most used resource I've ever had. Alan Gibbs' model of reflection. I wish I could write something like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be open and honest with you, and I'm going to share a reflection, a formative experience of mine that doesn't maybe reflect me in the best possible way, but is honest, and that uses this model of reflection to show how I went from a surface description to actually something quite meaningful. And then we're going to go on to thinking about doing this yourself, and then I promise I'll show you how to shape this into a poem. So for me, I'm going to give you an example of my first lecture. So this was just over a decade ago when I first started as a lecturer or assistant professor at Manchester Metropolitan University as a lecturer in science communication. And what happened? Well, in my first ever lecture, I waited outside the classroom to shake hands with my students. I don't know why, but I thought that's what you did. I thought that you waited outside and you shook hands with everyone. And one of the female students said she couldn't shake my hands for religious reasons. So feelings had said, well, I felt really embarrassed, but I was also really worried that I'd upset, shamed, or offended the student. Evaluation, what was good or bad? Well, it was very bad that I'd potentially upset the student, but I checked in with them after class, and thankfully this was not the case. Analysis, well, this was a really awkward situation. And normally, if we just did a basic description, we'd stop there. Okay, I shouldn't shake people's hands. It's a bit of a silly thing for me to do. But actually, what this did was it made me think, I, as a white, heterosexual, cisgendered Western man, literally the epicenter of privilege, was projecting my own positionality and what I thought to be comfortable or not. And actually, when I started thinking about this situation, rather than just, okay, not shaking hands, it made me really think about the needs and experiences of my students and how they were probably very different to my own. So the conclusion, well, what could I have done differently? I could have checked beforehand about the potential implications of my handshaking, for example, by asking other colleagues, at which point they would have said, no, Sam, nobody stands outside the classroom and shakes hands with all the students before they go in. That is a very silly thing to do. And what do I do differently now? Well, you'll be pleased to hear that I no longer loiter outside my classroom waiting to shake hands with my students. But more than that, it really was an incredibly powerful learning experience for me. And as a result of that, I try to understand the individual needs of my students rather than assume that they're just the same as mine. So yeah, thank you very much. And yeah, this really made me understand actually what positionality was as a result of this, and think about that going forward. So what I'd like you to all do now as well is I would like you to think about a learning or a teaching experience. Again, really interesting what Rachel said, because it could be something that you experienced as a student or as an educator. Go through each of the steps and try to write down 30 to 50 words for each one. I'll put them back up in a second. And then think about what steps you found to be the most difficult. People have the opportunity to share if they want to later on. So bear that in mind, but no one will ever be forced to share anything, so you can be as open as you want to. So here are the steps again. Again, for people who are watching the recording, I'll ask Yasser to just pause it in a second. You can do this activity and then resume. I'll give people about, you get probably 5 or 6 minutes. Don't worry if you don't get all the way around, it's fine. And don't worry if the evaluation bleeds into the analysis or the analysis bleeds into the conclusion, that's fine. If you end up with 4 instead of 6 steps, or if you write slightly more or less words, that's fine as well. So just to reiterate, what I'd like everyone to do is just to think about a formative learning or teaching experience. One will come to your head, like it can be positive or negative. Try to work your way through each of these steps, writing 30 to 50 words for each, and see how far you get. And I'll give you about 5 or 6 minutes to do so. I'll put myself on mute, but I'll leave my camera on. I'm just here. And if people want help, just either call out or put it in the chat as well. And Yasser, if you're able to, now might be a good time to pause the recording as well. I'll just pause. Thanks, Yasser. Oh, great. Laura, I'm really glad that, so Laura's written in the chat that it was an interesting process. I got an insight that was not clear to me when I started thinking about it. Laura, lots of different models like Kolb and Schoen exist, but I find this one is, for that exact reason, is really powerful, and it can take you to a place, even in a short period of time, that really helps you to reflect on something. I mean, I do this all the time, even with parenting and stuff, that I'm like, why are my children not listening to me? Oh yes, this is why. So what I'd like you to do now is to think about how can we turn this into a poem. So this is a process that I've adopted. So what we're going to do is we're going to take, and I'll give you an example, we're going to take the descriptions, feelings, and evaluation. We're going to write them side by side. We're going to look for a rhythm. That sounds very pretentious, but all it means is your rhythm. Everyone's rhythm's different. Everyone's got a rhythm. There's no wrong or right rhythm. There's just different rhythms. So just look for your rhythm. And then fill in the gaps using the rest of your reflections, but also words or phrases from your list poem. And then the most important thing is the poem true to your reflection. So you can add in words and stuff, that's fine. But I always think if you've got a choice between something being aesthetically very pleasing, but untrue, or maybe slightly cliched or clunky, but grounded in truth, then always go for the latter. We should always have the confidence to stand in our own truth. And that's what the poem should be. It should be true to our reflection. So to show what this looks like for mine, so this is what happens when I take the descriptions, feelings, and evaluations for the experience I gave you and write them side by side. So the next thing to do is to look for rhythm. All I mean here is introduce some line breaks. So just introduce some breaks into the line. If we want to be really fancy, we could call it an enjambment, which is just when we basically continue continue a thought over 2 lines. So, in my first ever lecture, I waited outside the classroom. That's an enjambment over 2 lines. So all I've done is I've just put in some line breaks. And then what I've done is I've basically just crossed out words that are either redundant or which are just saying the same things. And you can see that this poem then is starting to take shape. So this is the look for rhythm. This is the bit that probably takes the longest. Then what I do is to look in again and to fill in the gaps using the rest of the reflections and also words or phrases from your list poem and ask, is the poem true to your reflection? So when I look at this, I actually feel those last 3 lines, I felt embarrassed and worried. It was very bad. They're a bit weak, but also they're not true to the experience. This puts the focus of the poem on my needs and my experiences, which is actually at odds with the reflection of trying to understand the student experiences and the student voice. So at the end then we've got, in my first lecture, I waited outside the classroom to shake hands. One of the students said she could not. I felt embarrassed, for a shame we shared. And I'm going to invite all of you to do this yourself. I'll put the instructions up. But the last thing to do, if you have the time, is to pick a title. Titles of poems are very hard. One of my mentors told me something that always sticks with me. The title should tell you something that the poem does not. And the way that I interpret that is, if I've got a very literal poem, I tend to make my title a bit more playful. And if my poem is quite metaphorical or allegorical or playful. I tried to make it a little bit more literal. So in this instance, I called the poem Aligning Our Needs. So that's the process. So I want you to take the descriptions, feelings, and evaluation that you wrote down from your Gibbs's reflection, write them side by side, look for a rhythm, fill in gaps using the rest of your reflections and also words or phrases from your list poem, and ask, is the poem true to your reflection? I'm going to give you 5 or 6 minutes to do that, and then I will invite people to share if they feel comfortable doing so. And again, Yasser, if you're able, now would be an appropriate time to please pause the recording. Thank you. For people who are people who are watching the video, you can pause the recording or fast forward. We'll be taking about 5 minutes just to do this exercise. And I'll put myself on mute, but I'll be here if people have got any questions about the process. And I'll give you about a 2-minute warning as well. Don't worry if you don't finish, just get as far as you can. And again, we'll be inviting people to share if they feel comfortable doing so. Thank you. Thank you. And yeah, if anyone ever wants to use any of these exercises in their own learning and teaching, like, feel free to do so. I've shared the slide deck with everyone, and you do so without attribution as well. It's absolutely fine. So we've done writing. I would just ask, does anybody feel comfortable sharing what they've written, complete or incomplete? If they feel comfortable reading it out loud, please raise your hand physically or virtually. And if you'd like me to read it out, you could feel free to drop it into the chat. Laura, please, thank you.
Okay, I think people know I'm a retired teacher, so this is the poem of a retired teacher. Teaching without learners. Blog, blog, blog. Hello, are you there? Blog, blog, blog. Retired from teaching. Can't stop teaching. Wanting to be useful. Still not used to know more students. Just subscribers. Email addresses. Connected. Sharing. Disconnected. Disembodied. Teaching with ghosts of students past fluttering through my brain. I'm learning so much, like all teachers do, but wondering who's out there, like all bloggers do. How can I help you today?
Amazing. Thank you so much, Laura. I'm astonishing that you wrote that in 5 minutes.
It was the ghost of students past that came to me in reflection.
I love that line so much, and it is wonderful. Thank you, and beautifully read as well, Laura. I think a poem that works equally well read out and written down as well. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think you should blog that poem as well, Laura.
Of course I'm gonna blog it.
Thank you so much. Does anybody else feel comfortable sharing a poem? And if not, I mean, as is, oh, Alia, please, that'd be great. Thank you.
Bad leadership? Who's to say if it's good or bad anyway? We're all human beings at the end of the day. Should labels define who we are? This was a point for reflection by far.
Oh, amazing. Thank you, Alia. I think Laura's clicking her fingers as well, which is, the poetic way of saying how much we enjoyed that piece. So thank you so much, Alia. We're going to read Rachel's as well. So Rachel's written hers GPA. Rachel written theirs. I learn differently, judge daily with no academic value. APA, highlighters, discussion posts. I am an outcast. I am judged. I am alone. This is not right. This is not me. This is where I find my voice. Change is possible, but needed. I can be the voice of many. Beautiful, Rachel, and you are not alone here at MYFest either. Jenny tells us that people don't learn on a schedule, so deadlines must be bad. Let's get rid of them. Oops, no deadlines equals no work done. Even old teachers can learn to have a flexible schedule. Wonderful, Jenny. Thank you so much. Rita, did you want to share as well?
Yeah, because I got to run soon. So I'm an academic developer and academic as well. And so mine goes as this: a verbal spat with an academic, decolonization. Did I know enough? No. I defended my power as facilitator. Gosh, golly, what a teacher bully. Now, never. It's our learning and teaching space. Now we mitigate, navigate, and negotiate with grace.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much, Rita. These are all amazing people in 5 minutes' times. Heather, would you feel comfortable sharing yours, please?
Yes. Invited to present in front of strangers working at my university. Okay. Sitting in the audience, well prepared, but nervous. Waiting for my turn. Nerves growing. Stronger, stronger, stronger. Walking up to the podium. Seeing black spots. Got through it, but mortified. Inspired to get out of comfort zone. Need easy practice opportunities, feeling hopeful.
Oh, thank you so much, Heather. And I hope everyone's been inspired to get out of their comfort zone or within their comfort zone as well. And I would invite everyone, if they're not already on the Discord channel, to please join the Discord channel and post some of your poems in there as well, either in the Daily Create or just anywhere as well, because, you know, poetry is a wonderful way of us getting to know you as educators and as people as well. And thank you everyone for being so brave and for sharing. I really appreciate it. So as we come to the end, just want to say, if people are interested in this, we wrote a paper last year around this where we looked at those poems that I shared with you earlier from the Learned Words site and looked at how we can use to reflect on staff belonging in higher education. We did like a thematic analysis of them, which people might find interesting. And then if you want even more info on this, like I wrote a book on this with my colleague Kirsten Jack on poetry and pedagogy in higher education, which people are welcome to check out. If their libraries don't have a copy of it, let me know and I will send you a pre-typeset version. Absolutely fine. Thank you, Rita. That's very kind of you to say. And you need to run into an exam meeting. I hope that you enjoy the exam meeting and that the vulnerable academics that you're with can take solace in with you as well. So that's the end of my session. I always try to run on time. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and just want to thank everyone for being so present and engaged in this session. And I'll share with you my secret learning outcome now, which was that as a result of this session, I hope that everybody is a little bit more willing to welcome poetry into their lives. And if I've done that, then it's been a successful session. And thank you for turning up from various time zones across the world, and for writing poetry and for sharing your thoughts with me in a really respectful and critical manner. And yeah, continue to write poetry, connect with us on Discord, and please share your poems. I'm running a session next Tuesday on or next Monday on how to make games, because I'm also a games designer, and we'd love to see people there, but obviously just come to all of the stuff because MYFest is amazing. Thank you, Yasser and Noreen as well, and Irene for facilitating. And yeah, thanks everyone. Be safe and be well and be poetic.
Thank you so much, Sam, for such a wonderful session.
Thanks, Noreen. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone for facilitating as well. And yeah, Yasser, from my point of view, like really happy for the recording to go up whenever, in whatever capacity you want. And obviously, if you need anything from me, just let me know.